the degradation, declension, and eventual destruction of those denominations, it's a matter of history, and it's an ugly thing to watch. It's a slow, painful car wreck with explosions and lots of dead bodies. It's bad stuff. And it's happened over and over and over and over again. If you do not believe that God has spoken, if you do not believe, if you do not have the same high view of Scripture that Jesus and his apostles embody in everything they write and in all of their attitudes and all of their words, you might as well you can't even be a Trinitarian, and you're certainly not going to be Reformed. Because how often have we listened to the Zahns and the Olsons of the world on different levels get around the tough biblical texts by just simply compromising on the concept of inspiration and what it means and what the authority of the text is and how you interpret the text and come up with Gumby means of exegesis where you just that Midianite thing, that's just what the ancient Israelites thought about God. It's not really God speaking, and so on and so forth. So this is an absolutely key area as to whether you believe that Scripture is what Jesus said. The Scriptures cannot be broken. For him saying it is written was the final argument. And if you adopt a perspective that says, well, that's not enough, and please don't get me wrong. I mean, there are some people that get so loopy here they think that has something to do with the King James Bible or something like that, as if Jesus was quoting from the King James. That's not what we're talking about here. But if you don't have that view of the Scriptures as theanustos, God-breathed, if you cannot hear Jesus say, have you not read what was spoken to you by God, saying, and understand how read and spoken go together with one another there, you're really not going to be in a position to give much of a defense of the faith in this day and age. You're just not going to be able to. And as we move into a more and more post and anti-Christian world, you're not going to have a foundation, and you're going to find ways of major compromise. And of course, if you're absolutely convicted of these things, then it could cost you everything. It could cost all of us everything. We will find out and pray that God would cause us to be faithful. So, with that, let's take a look at the first of these videos. Hopefully I've got the right one here for you. The first was a question that came up in regards to difficulties in the Synoptic Gospels. Evidently, Dr. Lycona is writing a book on this subject. I'm to be perfectly honest with you, concerned about that, but that's how it goes. I haven't written a book on this subject, but I did teach the Synoptic Gospels for 11 years. So ran into most of this stuff before. And you've heard me deal with Jairus' daughter and all sorts of things like that numerous times before. But this one caught me by surprise. It caught me by surprise for a couple reasons. First of all, he's asked, what do you think the most difficult thing is that isn't explained by the concepts you've enunciated before about the nature of the Gospels and things like that? And much to my surprise, he actually identifies the location of the feeding of the 5,000 as one of the toughest examples he can come up with. And as soon as I heard that, as soon as his conclusion was, well, it just seems like Mark was confused, two things came into my mind. The first is something a lot of you thought of when you saw this as well. Sound like a familiar story? It is a familiar story. It's not this particular incident, but what was the door? What was the unlocking of the door that led to the apostasy of Dr. Bart Ehrman by his own testimony? which he's repeated many, 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 many times in almost the exact same words and frequently the same PowerPoint slides with the same misspelled words in it. Anyway, what was the what's the story? Remember, it was about Mark and the eating of the showbread and the high priest and stuff. And he had written this paper that he thought was pretty ingenious and coming up with a way of rescuing Mark and explaining what it meant. And he gets the paper back from his professor. I think this was at Princeton, as I recall. Might have been at Wheaton, but I think it was at Princeton. And the comment from the professor was, maybe Mark was just wrong. And that was the key that opened the door that freed Bart Ehrman from the Christian faith. Now, he wouldn't put it that way, but it's, if you follow the decline from there, that was where it started. The final thing that pushed him out the liberal door was the problem of evil, according to him. But that was a turning point in his thinking. Well, maybe Mark was just wrong. Oh, wow, there's all these, I could explain this by all these, wow, how does that work? And so to hear Dr. Licona, who himself, obviously, some of you aren't aware of this, but a few years ago, maybe somebody in channel could give me the year that this started, because I've forgotten, and when you're over 50, you're perfectly excused for forgetting which year it was, unless it was before you were 20, and then you remember everything. It's really weird. But what year was it when Dr. Licona published his book on the resurrection? It wasn't long ago. I'm thinking 3 years, maybe 2013-ish, 2014. And he commented on the resurrection of some saints. It wasn't all saints. Some saints in Matthew, I think it's 2754, something like that, just off the top of my head. And his explanation of it is still difficult to follow to this day, but he identified it as sort of a poetic device, and that it really didn't happen. There really wasn't any resurrection of saints. This is just Matthew's poetic